Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and this is My Life as a Landlord. I am so pleased you've joined me for today's show. As you may know, I am very active on social media platforms regarding landlording. That's appropriate. And most of the questions I see are about 10 normal questions that are almost predictable. But the top two are how do I get this person out of my unit? And then how do I get my money? But that's not the only questions that landlords ask. Today, I've invited an attorney to join us and learn more about how landlords are supposed to approach some of these pitfalls to rentals. Thanks for joining us from Pensacola. Geez, I can't even speak. Pensacola, Florida. Tim Baldwin. Thanks, Tim. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Jen. It's great to be with you today.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you've got a interesting history from Florida to Montana and one that led you back to practicing law. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, I've been an attorney since 2004. I started my practice in Florida. I was born and raised in Pensacola. Came back to Pensacola when I graduated law school. And in 2010, I moved to Montana. I practiced law there. Still had my license in Florida. Still did a lot of the same things. And then 2017, moved back to Florida. Learning that I probably should have never left. I came back and just hit the ground running where I left off. And yeah, so here we are, 2025, almost 2026, and the time is flying.
That's amazing. Well, tell us what you do.
Well, I'm a landlord attorney, so we represent landlords across the state of Florida, and it ranges from either the small landlord who self-manages his properties to a nationwide company that has thousands of apartments across the country.
Gotcha. Now, are you just in Florida or are you outside of Florida as well?
Well, we have our office just in Florida for now. We actually are expanding in other states. I think I may have mentioned that before to you. I think our first stop is going to be Arizona. We're already in works with finding a place there, opening up an office there. We do have clientele already there, and they love what we do. So they sort of been asking us, "Hey, can you come to Arizona?" And so we thought, well, this might be the good step in the right direction then for really doing what we want to do, and that is to be in as many states as we can.
That's amazing. Well, law regarding landlording, that's pretty specific niche. How did you get into that rabbit hole?
Well, when I started my practice in 2006, I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to compete against law firms that were well established with certain areas of law. So when I began to research this, I discovered that there really were and I developed a good reputation across the state of Florida as being one of the top landlord attorneys around, and have developed just a lot of great relationships in this area, and I love it, quite frankly. It's really a fun area of law to practice.
Amazing, amazing. Now, I have to ask, are you a landlord?
Well, I am not myself, but I am a real estate broker too. So I do broker a multifamily asset acquisitions company, and the relationship there formed because there was a client of mine who was in that business, and they discovered that I had my broker's license, so they wanted me to lead that effort, and so I agreed to do that. And so a lot of that, had to do with me, training their employees, creating their policies and procedures, overseeing, make sure they're doing things the right way. Yeah, so I am a broker as well.
It changes your perspective when you've got some different experience and you jump in the driver's seat of these different perspectives. If you've never been an entrepreneur, for example, you've never owned a business, you've never done a budget, it changes how you approach business. It's quite sobering, actually. It's pretty incredible.
Yes,
Now,
no, you're exactly right.
yeah, it's interesting. When we talked Montana, Florida, and then now you're talking about Arizona, I'm sure you've got dabbling in different places because of the outreach that you've got, which we'll get into. But is let's talk about different locations geographically. There's a lot of talk about where landlord friendly states are. Now, of course, I'm
Yep.
talking just the US, but do you feel like Florida is landlord friendly?
I would consider Florida to be landlord safe, in that
Oh,
the laws are I really believe are fair, in that doesn't heavily side one or the other, in that there are some legal some statutory protections where the courts help to protect tenants who would abuse the eviction process. And so the case law here is really good that backs up that statute. And for those who may be familiar somewhat with this idea, is that when you have an eviction action pending, the tenants are required to deposit all of the accrued rent and back rent into the court registry for them to be able to stay in possession of that property. And as
hmm.
soon as they don't follow that order, the landlord gets possession back immediately, just about. I mean, there's a little bit of a process there, but it's only a matter of days before they'll get their property back. So that right there helps a lot. And there are other instances that are, I would say, again, safe for landlords in that it doesn't overly burden the landlords regarding their obligations of habitability. They're reasonable. They typically just touch the main components and structure of the unit without overly burdening the landlord. And then, of course, there's a lot of notice requirements which protect the landlord and the tenant as well. But before a tenant can sort of take action against the landlord, they have to be given certain notice, legal
Hmm.
notice, so that the landlord is aware of what's going on and they can prepare accordingly.
I think that's pretty standard. I've seen that in lots of places, not just in the US, but Canada and then Australia, and
Mhm.
I'm starting to look more into Europe as well, which that's very different. And I think that's standard. I think it comes down to communication between the tenant and the landlord, and when that breaks down, if there's action, you still have to talk, even if it's, through certified mail.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned small mom and pop landlords who self-manage, and then you go all the way up to bigger corporate conglomerates. But you had coined a term that I really like in our previous discussion, uh, an unsophisticated landlord. What is that?
Well, it's a landlord. I would say it's a landlord who has not spent a lot of their time learning sort of the trends, educating themselves on the law, even going so far as to go to seminars and make sure that they're
Mm,
keeping themselves apprised of the new, or even not even just new, but the fundamentals of what it takes to properly manage their rentals. And so many times I would say they kind of fly by the seat of their pants. They kind of run their business with emotions rather than with a solid
mm.
plan that's based in law and based in contract. And so they tend to get themselves in a lot more trouble than ones who kind of take the other approach.
I think those unsophisticated landlords are the ones that end up in the landlord Facebook group saying, I rented to this person and they gave me a sob story and I shouldn't have because now I can't get them out and they've trashed my unit or they have, five dogs and 10 cats and whatever else and just cause
Yeah,
a bunch of problems. But how
absolutely.
can unsophisticated landlords stay out of trouble, you think?
Well, first of all, I mean, this is maybe sound self-serving because this is what I do, but they really do need a landlord attorney. They need someone who's going to help them, just like if you're creating a business or you're doing your taxes or have a health problem or whatever. How do I take care of myself? You need to go to the professional who knows how to advise you properly to get you on the right path. Because the business comprises of the lease agreement primarily. That is sort of your business operational document of how you're going to run that business. And so for you to be able to enforce those rules, it's got to be in the lease and the tenant has to agree to it. Without that, you're left with just the bare bones statutory requirements for those tenants, which by and large is very minimal. And so,
Mhm.
kind of like what you just described, you can have too many people living there, too many animals there, they're not maintaining the property properly, so on and so forth. So, and next thing you know, it gets out of hand. So you have to have a great lease, and that starts with an attorney helping you. There are other things as well as just knowing how do you deal with tenant problems. What sort of forms do you need? What templates should I be using? How does the law expect me to fill out those forms? So that when
Mm,
you do run into those problems, you can effectively remedy those problems during the tenancy.
pretty powerful. What do you say to a landlord who doesn't have any lease at all? I mean, are they've just shot themselves in the foot?
Well, I mean, I guess it sort of depends because typically if there's no lease at all, that means they're at will. So at will
Mm,
tenancies can be terminated throughout the states. It might vary in the number of days notice, but like in Florida, it's a 30 days notice prior to the end of the monthly period. So, worst case scenario, you're looking at maybe at most like 60 days out. Okay. So that kind of gives you the ability to terminate quickly if you need to, but
mm.
it doesn't really help you with enforcement necessarily. Like if you kind of want to keep that tenant there, not having a lease is again, there's really no enforcement mechanism, and you're relying on sort of the worst case scenarios for the judge to see your situation and say yes, this tenant needs to leave, and that's just not a good way of doing business.
I really like your term unsophisticated landlord because in my mind, there are people who identify and say, I am a landlord. And then there are people who don't say that out loud because they don't identify that. Maybe they don't want to, their rental is their side hustle that they run off the side of their desk. And so for me, your term, an unsophisticated landlord, is someone who does not identify as a landlord. It's there, they just sort of wing it,
Yeah.
but they don't actually want to be a landlord per se. And you, like you say, you have a front row seat of exactly what happens when things go sideways and these unsophisticated landlords either do it wrong and you have to help get them out of it, or if you're trying to avoid people being unsophisticated at all, like you mentioned, the corporations, right?
Yeah.
So now
Well,
here's
I
a
think.
question,
Oh, I'm sorry.
please.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I think that landlords sort of have to make that decision. Do I want to be a landlord or not? Because if you do, there is a proper way of doing it, and there's a wrong way of doing it. So if that matters to you, then you should consider whether that's the kind of business you want to be in or not.
I find that just you said the word business, and there's a lot of people who, because they've been employees their whole life, they've never jumped into trying to run a business. And being a landlord, you actually have to have an idea of revenue and expenses, and then of course it goes into your taxes. And so it's not like you're going to a job every day and then you get a W-2 at the end of the year and you give that to, TurboTax and it just files your taxes for you. It gets way more complicated. And yeah, it's interesting to see how people view the business of rentals, even one rental, even one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have clients with one rental, or is it everybody more than one, or can you even answer?
Typically, okay, so when we get a call from a landlord who has one rental property, it's normally there's a big problem,
Yeah.
because again, they just let things get out of control. They didn't do it right from the get go, and so we do sometimes, yeah, we have clients who they just have one rental, but again, it's kind of like they're searching for an attorney because there's just something completely out of hand and and they're in serious trouble, so they need help.
No kidding. No kidding. One thing that continues to sort of circle around a bit is the issue of cameras. These doorbell cameras, landlords want to put up a camera or tenants want to put up a camera. What is your take on the cameras, regardless of who puts them up, and then the privacy issues resulting from that?
Yeah, well, these laws are probably going to be primarily governed by state law. Now, there are some
Mhm.
some federal overlays, I believe, with regard to privacy. But in general, of course, you never want to put a camera that is invasive into the tenant's privacy. So that
Of
would
course.
certainly include anything inside of the home. Now, as
Right.
far as exterior, there's questions about that too, because if
Mm,
it's, for example, if it's single family, and if the landlord has a camera that's pointed from, let's just say, a light pole, some sort of exterior camera, I really think the courts are going to not to allow that from the landlord.
mm,
It's basically like an inspection, a continual inspection of that
mm.
property, and most statutes require the landlord to give notice of an inspection before they can enter. And so I think you're going to run into problems there. Now, if you have community areas, then I think that you're going to be much safer in that regard. But you have to watch out for the audio recordings because many
Oh.
states regulate audio recording. You can't record audio unless the other party has consented, unless it's considered to be a public place. And so there's going to be a question as to whether there's a reasonable expectation of privacy in that area. So, for example, if I'm in a swimming pool in an apartment complex, is that considered to be a place where I expect to have some privacy? I think a lot of
Hmm.
tenants would say yes, right? I mean, it's sort of a more intimate scenario as opposed to maybe a gymnasium or, a social club or something like that. But they do have to look into their state laws as to audio recording. But again, though, I go back to this is that some of this can be hashed out or not hashed out, but it can be addressed in the lease agreement so that the tenants are agreeing
Hmm.
that, hey, these are our areas that are being recorded, posting signage in the areas that are being recorded. So you're giving public notice or the tenants notice of where it is. So there is some, again, analysis that's involved of where can you properly place cameras, but it's a big issue. Now for tenants, you mentioned tenants. Now, I've seen some landlords to say they prohibit tenants from putting up cameras at all, like period. You can't put up cameras.
Mhm.
I think that there's challenges to that because, tenants, this is their primary residence. This is where they're living. They have a right to protect it. They have a right to make sure that their contents are protected, and so on and so forth. Especially like if you have children living there, it's even a greater concern, especially with all the delivery, the online delivery services and such.
Right.
So that kind of a restriction, I think the court's going to look at that from is this against public policy? Because most statutes have a provision that says courts can strike lease provisions where they're against public policy. I could foresee a judge
Mhm.
saying that that is. Now you can regulate sort of how they do it or where they can put the cameras. Obviously, you don't want them to damage your property, so yet you can instruct them on
Mhm.
how they are to do that. So rules and regulations would be appropriate in that scenario.
Right. Those Ring doorbell cameras are real popular. Just, especially if they've got kids, kids coming home from school, riding the
Yep.
bus and it's recording. Very interesting. And I like how you were saying too about a landlord putting up a camera or having a camera, not disclosing it, and then it would be basically a continual inspection. But I didn't think about the audio portion of that.
Hmm.
I was just thinking more of the privacy aspect. So the audio is kind of a separate animal. That's
Yep.
really interesting.
It is a
Hmm.
separate animal because there are specific statutes about recording audio. Yeah.
That's wild. Like for me, I consider myself as a sophisticated landlord. Like I say, I am a landlord in two countries. Like I'm a landlord, and I'm learning. I mean, this is why I wanted you on the show, Tim, is because I don't understand this stuff, and if I don't understand it, then there's probably bigger, greater questions. But speaking of all that, how are landlords in general, whether sophisticated or not, supposed to keep up with all these changing tenancy laws, regardless of where their rentals are located? How are we supposed to keep up?
Well, there are some national, education associations. There's state, there's local. I mean, getting involved in those would be helpful.
Mhm.
Many times there's attorneys that are associated with those groups. I mean, I am myself. I speak at seminars quite frequently. So staying on top of that through those associations would probably help to streamline your education process. Finding
Mhm.
other resources like the website that I have, for an example, it's a website designed for landlords for that specific purpose. So you need to find your trustworthy resources, and I say trustworthy because they're not all equal. You have some that really are
Mm.
just, if for lack of a better phrase, they're there to get users either subscribed for free or maybe for a small price, and they use the site for other purposes rather than just truly educating landlords. So make sure you're getting a good resource, and that's a starting point. And then again, as I say, form a relationship with a landlord attorney because they can help you in a lot of ways to make sure that you're keeping up with the statute changes as well as case law.
Right. Hire the experts and let them be the experts, right? That's a good
Yes,
thing. Yeah.
yes.
Well, you brought up education and you mentioned your website. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so it's landlordhotline.net. It's actually fairly new still. We released it earlier this year. But I knew that, dealing with, as we're calling them, unsophisticated landlords, but really for any landlord, because you can never know too much. I just
Mm.
noticed that there was not a great resource, what I consider to be a great resource for landlords across the board. So whether that's having the right forms, training, education, community forums, and it's all driven by attorney input. It's informed by a landlord tenant attorney. And so I decided, well, this is what I want to do. So we did, and again, it's ever growing at this point. But what I've seen in the with other websites, and this is not to, and I'm not going to pick out anyone in particular, but they kind of tout themselves as being that kind of resource, and some of them actually are pretty good. Um, but a lot of them are driven peer to peer comments, right? They're not driven by attorneys, and even if they do have forms and leases, they're just they're wanting in a lot of ways, especially the lease agreement. And so it's just my desire that this website be the best go-to landlord resource out there.
That's amazing. What's it cost?
We actually have a special right now. We're running that's 3 months for free.
Oh,
It's $35 a month. That's the cost of the membership. We're kind of toying with maybe doing some different levels, like you get greater maybe or lesser access. It kind of depends. So again, it's fairly new, but right now, if you were to go there, it's $35 a month.
that's amazing. Now you also have a podcast. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, well, the name is like my law firm, Property Management Law Solutions Podcast, and so it again designed strictly for landlords and property managers, and so just about every topic is geared towards them. Now, I will say, Dr. Jen, that not every topic is landlord tenant law, right? So I think that diversifying the topics is good because there's a lot of things that affect our lives, like such as your health, paying
Hmm.
attention to your health um, that affects us on a day to day. So I've had a health expert on my show, and we've talked about how does that affect business if you're an entrepreneur. How important is it to stay healthy and these types of things. I had a chief deputy from the sheriff's office here in our county on one of my recent shows, and we talked about criminal stuff, and how does that relate to landlords and these sorts of things. So I try to make it diverse and interesting, but yeah, it's all designed to help property managers.
That is amazing. Good for you. Oh my gosh.
It's fun. I love it. Just like this right here. I love this.
You're an educator at heart, Tim. I mean, I've talked with you. I've looked over your website, looked at a bunch of stuff, and I just said, "Why are you only doing, a small bit? You need to go bigger. You need to go bigger." And but that's me as a business strategist. Yes, I'm a landlord, but I'm a business strategist. That's my real job. But Tim,
I
I'm
love it.
so glad you're on the show. What did we not talk about?
Oh
Did we
boy,
hit
that's
it
a
all?
big question. Well, I mean, you asked me when you and I first talked, like, what do you think is sort of the crux? Like, what is the essential that you think landlords should know about? And my answer was, without hesitation, a great lease agreement.
Hmm.
The lease agreement is your driving document. But here's the catch to that. You need to understand your lease agreement. You need to understand the context of every provision. It's like, why
Hmm.
does this provision matter? How does this affect the way I run my business? When you can fully comprehend your lease in every scenario, it now begins to actually make you think about your operations of your business, and policies and procedures that should govern how you respond and how you react to certain situations. So the lease is so very important. But coupled with that is the knowledge, and you need to educate yourselves. And I'm sure people who are listening to your show, that's what their desire is. That's why they're listening to you. So continue that, never stop it, and then learn how you can leverage that knowledge so that you can grow the number of rental properties that you manage and begin to build bigger and bigger wealth.
Amazing. Love it. Love it. Love it. Tim, if a listener is interested in contacting you, how do they get a hold of you?
They can go to several ways. One is through LinkedIn. You can look up me on LinkedIn, Tim Baldwin. I think it's Tim Baldwin. Maybe it's Timothy Baldwin. Or you can look up Property Management Law Solutions on LinkedIn or Landlord Hotline on LinkedIn. Or you can go to the websites, which is pmlawsolutions.com, landlordhotline.net. And then I can give you my office phone number as well, which again is in Pensacola, Florida, 850-857-2463. And then you can email our office at connect at pmlawsolutions.com.
Love it. Any parting thoughts, Tim?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your show. I appreciate what you're doing, and can appreciate the landlords and property managers who are listening. I would just say thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Been a pleasure having you on today. Thanks.
Thank you.